Well, welcome. So good to have you here. We'd love you to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about who you are and where you're from.
My name's Hosanna. I'm 24 years old. I'm originally from Auckland in New Zealand. I grew up there till I was about 11 years old, and then we moved over here to Brisbane, Australia, where we've been like the past 13 years. So my parents, they were born again into the charismatic Pentecostal movement in New Zealand. So we always grew up in church. Like there were six of us, so my parents ran like a really tight ship growing up, which I understand now having a kid. You kind of have to. I kind of knew everything. I knew about Jesus, I knew about God, and I knew all the songs and church and everything. Jesus was there as a big part of our life growing up, but then, yeah, I didn't have that personal connection with him myself. I remember as a kid always being super, like hyper aware that there were things around, like things that people couldn't see, like the spiritual realm sort of thing. My mum's background and her family were all into like Māori black magic and witchcraft and stuff. So I always knew that there was stuff going on, and I remember always being able to sense and feel that there were things around. I remember my mum only sort of explaining to me later on, and she explained to me later on that actually when I was a baby and I was being dedicated, someone prophesied over me that I would see into the spiritual realm. And then I made a friend when I was 12 years old who introduced me to like smoking weed and stuff. So it was from that point I started gradually, just slowly and slowly drifting away from God and from church and not wanting anything to do with it really.
So here's a quote by Donna Rice. I began to compromise my Christian values, partying and dating guys who weren't Christians. This lady's testimony in a big part shows once again, and this has been proven over and over for thousands of years, the wrong friends and the wrong associates and the wrong boyfriends and the wrong business partners and the wrong people you marry has a major negative effect on your life. Now, it is tragic that people don't learn this, or is not taught more forcefully at school and university. The wrong friends, the Bible says, a companion of fools will be destroyed. The wrong friends will have an unbelievably terrible impact on your life. People don't realize this. Get rid of the wrong friends as quickly as possible. Treat it as the most dangerous poison in a loving way. After that, pray for them. Pray for them. But do not walk in their paths. Listen to this tragic route this lady had to follow because of the wrong friends, and how unfortunate that people just are doing this over and over, generation after generation.
I started really getting into like new age sort of practices and stuff. Like the people I started hanging around, it was the girl who introduced me to smoking marijuana. She was really into like, the Ouija boards and all that sort of thing. So I remember one day actually, I don't know why, but we just decided to draw a Ouija board in the back of our like textbook, like our school book. And we drew it up and we're like, it's so funny, whatever. And then I went home and I would always put things under my bed that I knew that it was like I wasn't supposed to have. And so I'd put it under my bed and it was like I could not sleep at all. And I started freaking out. I remember having like these really weird dreams and just being completely terrified. Something was obviously had been opened up. And my dad, I remember I'd tell my dad and he'd be like, yeah, I'll pray through the room. And he prayed through the room like multiple times. But obviously because I was dabbling in all that sort of stuff, I'd bring it all back in.
Well, another thing she talks a lot about, which we really have to talk about, is that behind drinking, behind marijuana, behind drugs, behind violence, anger, behind sexual immorality, all the sins young people start getting into, the devil is behind that, demons are behind that, the wicked spiritual realm is behind that. And if you open doors and allow that in, and allow and welcome that, listen to what terrible things happens to her. This is very important to teach young people. Alcohol misuse is not just alcohol misuse. There's an evil spiritual realm pushing that. Sexual sin is not just sexual sin on the surface. There's an evil spiritual realm that wants to destroy you through that.
And then from there I became friends with other people who were into card reading and all this other stuff, and witchcraft, really. Card reading and psychics and all that sort of thing, crystals and everything, and dream catchers. And so that sort of became what drew my attention more than Christianity did. Like, I was still trying to do the whole church thing, but just obviously you can't have light and darkness in the same spot. I started losing myself a lot. I really got into like the hippie movement. So I started like, you know, getting around with no shoes on and never brushing my hair. My hair was like a matted mess. And just really just getting into reggae and getting stoned and just doing nothing, longboarding everywhere, doing nothing with my life really, just not caring. And I started watching things that I shouldn't have been watching and doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And I started, it's, you know, it's like the door of perversion. You open one thing up and then it's like, oh, that doesn't satisfy me anymore, so I have to keep going. And I started thinking, like, I was like, am I bisexual? What's going on? I started really struggling in my mind about who I was. I'm not like the Christian girl anymore or anything. I'm still going to church, but I'm also reading my horoscopes and getting into like psychic stuff and like cards and crystals and dream catchers, and I'm also like watching all these things and questioning my sexuality and all that sort of stuff.
Look at this quote. Sin doesn't stop where we want it to. It keeps taking us further. Sin is from the devil. Alcohol misuse, drugs, sexual misuse, sexual immorality, whatever. The devil wants to use that, which often has a seemingly very fun, pleasant marketing campaign, but wants to use that to destroy you. Sin ends in death.
That started really raging on until I turned about 16, 17, and it was like something switched. I think we must have had a day at church where just something switched, and I was like, I'm just going to go like whole hog for God. And grade 12, I just did it. I knuckled down, started going on for God. I stopped smoking weed, and I honestly, that's the happiest I had felt in ages. Like, I was like, oh, you know, pray every day, walking to school and everything. And I started feeling really good about myself. And I even signed up to Bible college. I went to Bible college after I graduated high school. And I did about 6 months there, and then everything started falling apart again, obviously, because I didn't actually have a relationship with Jesus. It was sort of like, oh yeah, you know, God's there and I'm here, and all of this, I'm just going to do all of this, and then everything's going to be sweet. But I didn't have an intimate one-on-one relationship with Jesus still. And so everything started falling apart about 6 months into my internship with this Bible college. And I sort of just went, I can't afford it. I can't do any of this anymore. And I dropped out. And as I dropped out, I got reunited with friends who were smoking weed again and drinking again. And it was like, you know, when you come out of that sort of thing, and then when you go back to it, it's like worse than ever before. So I started doing that. I started packing on the weight because I was just eating and drinking and smoking weed all the time, not doing anything else. I was a youth leader. I didn't want to be a good influence on the kids there anymore. I was just like, yeah, I don't care. And then it was just before my 18th birthday, a marriage in the family split up, and they were in charge of the youth group at the time. And he had cheated. It was the male had cheated in the relationship. And I was just like, everything in my mind just like crumbled. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this. I stopped going to youth because that was sort of the limit. My parents were like, you know, when you're 18, you can make your own decisions. I turned 18. I moved out of home into my sister's house. I got caught up again with a friend who introduced me to weed when I was 12. And she introduced me to working in the nightclub scene. And I was like, yeah, I would like to make some extra money. And so she was like, oh, I'm going to a trial if you want to come. And I was like, okay. I went along, and it was at a strip club, an adult bar, whatever. And I only went with the intention, I was like, I'm just going to be a waitress. And I'm just going to, you know, waitress there and just make some extra money on the weekends. And for some reason, it was like when I got there, I just had this urge. And it's like, I knew as well inside me that I was going to go for more of it. And it was just when they were handing out the things, like the application forms, I just went, yeah, okay, and like split second changed my mind and grabbed a dancer form. And from that point on, it just went. And I was like, yeah, okay, and I started dancing. I was so naive to what I was doing. Like I was still a virgin when I started working in the strip clubs as a stripper. And so no one had ever seen me naked. I didn't know what I was doing, but I started getting involved in that. And within a month of working there, I had met a guy in the club who had introduced me to cocaine, who introduced me to speed, and I think MDMA, and my whole life had just done a complete 180. And I literally I remember at that point walking down the road some days and I just felt like a shell of a human walking. Like it was everything inside me was just gone, dead. And just walking, and it was all that mattered was my outward appearance. So I was like, I feel dead on the inside, may as well just work on everything on the outside. So I started getting addicted to like the gym and to drugs and all this other stuff, and I started working out and hammering my body, and I put all my self-worth and my identity into those sorts of things of how I looked. I became so obsessed. Like I'd always be like, how's my hair look? How's my skin look? Oh my gosh, I'm not wearing any makeup. Oh, what are they going to think about me? Like spending heaps, hundreds of dollars on my nails and like my clothes and my shoes. And it was, I'm working in the club and I'm dancing, so I'm racking up all this money every weekend and I'm just spending it like water. And as it progressed, obviously, I ended up being cheated on by this boyfriend that introduced me to all the stuff, and my whole life just started really spiraling downhill. I started partying a lot. I started trying all these other drugs, and I became highly promiscuous because I was sort of like, no guy's ever going to hurt me again. I'm going to be the one that holds all the power and holds all the control. I'm going to be hypersexual and everyone's going to want me, like male, female, I don't care. Everyone's going to want me, but I'm going to be the one to turn them away and be like, no, I don't need you and I don't want you. And obviously it was actually just this manifestation of the spirit of rejection that I had held my entire life. But at this point I had realized that I could control it. I could use it to my advantage to actually control everything and everyone around me. I had a few boyfriends, but they're sort of like, flash in the pan, like really hot for like a couple months and then be like, oh, nah, I'm over it now. And I was spending copious amounts of money on these bad relationships that I was in because I was like, I don't want you to leave me. I don't want you to hate me, so I'm going to buy your love just enough so you feel like you need me and you want me. Didn't work and never worked out in the end. Or I ended up with all these toxic relationships and friendships where they were just using me really, or I was using them to some extent. I think most of it, I still had this weird sense, like belief in God. Like I remember one time my friend who I'd grown up in church with, who had also gone off the rails, she was saying to me, we were talking about it one day, and she said, I believe in God, but I don't think I believe in Jesus. And it was when she said that, there was something in me that was like, what? Like, how do you not believe in Jesus if you believe? And I like knew there was something inside me that knew that there was wrong. What she said, it was wrong.